All right, this is One Last Midnight. Welcome back to another episode of Astra Near, or should I say No Man's Sky. I was asked to do a comparison versus No Man's Sky versus Astra Near. And to be honest with you, it's kind of hard to do a comparison between these two games because while they are similar space games, they're not really the same. You know, they're both completely two different games. I know they have some similarities. You're exploring, you're gathering stuff, you're crafting, but I mean, they are completely two different. Since I was asked though, let me go ahead and try to make a comparison between the two. At the very least, let me show you some of the features that both of them have to offer. I hope you guys enjoy the video. So in No Man's Sky, when you start off, you're presented with a screen where you can load your game or you can start a brand new game. And when you start a brand new game, you have the choice of levels of difficulty. So you pick one of the levels of difficulty, and when you get into No Man's Sky, you start in a scenario where you're pretty much crashed. You're damaged. You've got to go on a hunt to find some items, and No Man's Sky is really good, at least now and beyond, about giving you really in-depth tutorial or instructions on what the next step is, at least in the beginning of the game. So as you wander around on your first planet and you get to the point where you've, unlocked a couple things, you finally get to an area where you discover a spaceship that's completely busted up and you've got to repair it, and then you're in the game. That is the beginning of No Man's Sky. In Astroneer, it's very similar. You're presented with the dialogue where you can load an existing game, or you can start a brand new game. When you start a brand new game, however, there are not any levels of difficulty. Astroneer does not provide any levels of difficulty. The game is pretty much set at one single level of difficulty. Now you can choose before your launch your suit and your palette color of your suit, but then when you launch, you land on a planet. Now Astroneer does a great job of walking you through what you need to do. It's not necessarily on the screen with dialogues, but they happen to give you icon representation. So if something's important, there'll be an icon up to kind of grab your attention to go over there and take a look at it. You'll start the game with a small little base, and then it's your job to proceed on and start building up your base. Now, at that point, when you've got the minor pieces of your base built up, it doesn't really handhold you from there on out. So my recommendation is to go through the tutorial and go ahead and take a look at and walk through the tutorial of Astroneer. You'll get a great understanding of how to move around and the critical items that you need to get you started. All right, let's talk about ships, planets, and systems within both of the games. So in No Man's Sky, you're offered a wide variety of ships and classes of ships. These ships range from explorers and haulers to fighters and trader class vessels. You can then use these vessels to fly across your planet and fly across the solar system. Ultimately, you'll have to maintain your ships. Sometimes you have to repair them, but you definitely have to fuel your ships. The solar systems and planets inside of No Man's Sky are enormous. I think somebody said 80 quintillion planets in No Man's Sky. Each one is procedurally generated. So each planet is going to be slightly different when you land on it. You are going to see over time a lot of redundancy and a lot of repetition on planets and animals and that type of stuff that you encounter. But it's very interesting, the size of the universe that's in No Man's Sky, and your ability to fly from a solar system to solar system is kind of unique in at least this type of space game. The only other game that I've seen it where it's this incredibly large is Elite Dangerous. But this feels pretty overwhelming. It's almost like a never-ending amount of exploring that you can do. Unfortunately, like I said before, you're going to start seeing a lot of repetition, and it's going to start feeling really redundant after a while. So while there is so much to go look at, after a while it gets that wow state kind of just drizzles away to more like, this is a little too much. It's a little overkill. In Astroneer, the ships and planets and systems slightly different. Astroneer really only provides you 3 vehicles that you can leave the planet with, and they're really truly just vehicles to take from one planet to another. You're not flying across the surface of the planet like you would in No Man's Sky. It is more of a, kind of think of a lunar lander type concept where you're launching from one planet and just landing on another. And when you go into space, you're going to quickly notice that there isn't a huge variety of planets to visit. Matter of fact, there's really only 7 planets that you can visit inside of Astroneer. And I said planets, and I should have said astronomical bodies, because 2 of them are actually moons. So again, spaceflight in Astroneer is a little bit different, and the scope of your game area is significantly reduced compared to No Man's Sky, but that is not a bad thing. I think Astroneer's 7 planets or astronomical bodies, allow for a lot of variety. Launching from one planet to the next in Astroneer is pretty simple. You get in your little shuttlecraft, you launch into space, and then you launch into the solar system view where you pick your next planet you want to land on and click it and go there. When you arrive, you're presented with some landing spot areas. They're predefined, so it's not free floating like it is in No Man's Sky. You pick your area in which you want to land, and that's where you start exploring. While the planets are limited in Astroneer, I've never felt that the game was limited by the lack of number of planets. I think there's enough inside of the 7 planets of Astroneer to keep you busy for quite a while. One thing that is a huge difference between No Man's Sky and Astroneer is the cave system inside of Astroneer seems to be a little bit more fleshed out than it is in No Man's Sky. So while Astroneer only has 7 planets, it ultimately really has 7 layers per planet, where each cave system layer has some slight variations of plants and the look and feel of each one of those levels. All right, let's talk about getting around in both of these games. Now, No Man's Sky, there's a couple different ways for you to get around. We just got done talking about spaceships, but ultimately when you start off, you're going to be running from place to place. In No Man's Sky, you manage your oxygen inside of your exosuit, where you have the ability to produce oxygen, and all you need to do is power that particular system. As well as there's a protection system inside of your exosuit that needs to be powered up for when you encounter storms. And yes, storms are a thing inside of No Man's Sky, and they are pretty deadly if you don't have what it takes to power those protective systems. There are exocraft vehicles inside of No Man's Sky. Essentially, these are vehicles that you can drive around or actually even drive in the water. So think of it, there's 3 really big ways to get around in No Man's Sky. That is walking around, using your exocraft to get around, which is driving in some fashion or another, and then using your spaceship to get around if you want to fly from one position on the planet to the next, or if you want to go from planet to planet or system to system. Astroneer has a very similar mechanism for getting around. Ultimately, you're going to start moving around initially by walking from place to place. You're going to have to manage your oxygen just like you would in No Man's Sky, but you're managing it in a slightly different way. While No Man's Sky has some sort of, technology on your backpack, in Astroneer there's a technology that you wind up either getting initially or you wind up building that you can put on your base that will provide oxygen via a tether system. Unless you have some sort of oxygen tanks or a portable oxygen generator, you're pretty close to some sort of tether system to provide you oxygen. But otherwise, running around is a possible solution, and you have to in the beginning to get from point A to point B, or to look for those resources that you might need. Vehicles are also available inside of Astroneer. There are 4 levels of vehicles that you can have. a tractor, a buggy, a medium-sized rover, and a large rover, and these will help you get from place to place. Each one of these vehicles has a slightly different driving mechanic, and depending on, you know, what you want to use your vehicle for, whether it's exploration or whether it is for actually gathering resources and bringing them back to the base, you might want to, you know, change the vehicle based on your needs. Mining and terraforming between both of the games, they're kind of similar, but they're used slightly differently. In No Man's Sky, to mine or terraform, you're going to be using a gun called a multi-tool. Your multi-tool can be enhanced with power-ups and add-ons to help you do things faster, like mine faster or dig into the terrain quicker. Mining specific resources is done in one of two ways in No Man's Sky. You're either going to be using what's called the mining section of your multi-tool, or you're going to be using the terrain manipulator of your multi-tool to be able to dig down and either, you know, get those resources or even to dig into the earth. Terraforming inside of No Man's Sky, I haven't found to be extremely useful. To be honest with you, I have never used it in a fashion like I would in Astroneer. Astroneer uses terraforming slightly differently, and we'll take a look at it in a second. But terraforming seems to be more of kind of like a little mini game in No Man's Sky, where you're looking for salvage containers or you're looking for some sort of buried treasure that you can uncover with your terrain manipulator. But again, I haven't really used the terrain manipulator in No Man's Sky to do any kind of serious excavating. I've never built a cave base where I've had to dig out my own cave base and or sculpt with it. I don't really think that it's a good tool for sculpting. So like I said, I think the way that they use it is more of a mini game kind of concept where you're hunting for treasure. Yeah, Astroneer for doing terrain manipulation and mining is very similar. You have what's called a terrain tool, and that terrain tool can be upgraded with various mods, but you wind up digging into the ground to get resources out. And also, if you wind up having some canisters that you can make to store soil, you can then use that soil to rebuild, to make ramps or to fill in a hole or any other kind of terrain manipulation that you might possibly need. I found that in Astroneer, terrain manipulation is a necessity. You know, they absolutely force you to use your terrain tool to make new ground, whether it is digging down into the cave system, spanning some crevice that you might come across, or building a ramp to get from, you know, one side of something to another. You absolutely have to use your terrain tool to manipulate the ground. Again, but same kind of concept. You're using some sort of terrain tool to either deform the ground or to get resources out of the ground. So both games really compare equally when it comes to the terrain manipulator, with the caveat that No Man's Sky does offer more additional boosts and modifications to its terrain tool or its multi-tool. All right, let's go ahead and get into plants and animals between both of the games. Now, No Man's Sky has a huge variety of flora and fauna. The plants and animals between No Man's Sky and Astroneer is really where you start to see a huge difference. In No Man's Sky, every time you land on a new planet, you get a variety of different plants and animals that you can wind up scanning and cataloging. Again, when you go from all of these 80 quintillion planets inside of No Man's Sky, you're going to start seeing varieties of plants and animals that are very, very similar. But the concept is that every time you land, you're getting something slightly new and slightly varied. No Man's Sky does offer a huge variety of dangerous plants and a huge variety of dangerous animals. And the way you're defending yourself against those is using the multi-tool to either shoot it with a blaster or to mine it up if it's got some sort of resource that you can mine as well. With that said, Astroneer is not without its diversity. Each one of Astroneer's planets has a slightly different look and feel. So you'll wind up landing on a planet that is, whether it's icy barren planet, or you'll wind up landing on a desert planet that has cactus and jump plants, or even on a barren moon type of planet. While you don't have that huge diversity, Astroneer does a great job of having a good variety of plants and dangerous plants that you see from planet to planet. Now, Astroneer does not have any animals. There are no deadly animals in Astroneer. The only encounter that you're going to come across with something that is deadly is going to be some sort of deadly plant. But I don't feel that this limits Astroneer in any way. Regardless, Astroneer is extremely beautiful to look at, and while it doesn't have that huge myriad of planets, it still offers a great variety for your eye. Okay, let's get into NPCs and story between No Man's Sky and Astroneer. No Man's Sky has a huge storyline. You actually get forced into the story in very early on in the beginning of the game. Within the first hour or two of gameplay, they gently guide you into the Artemis story. And the Artemis story is pretty long. At least the last time I did it, it was pretty long. So in that, you'll wind up meeting a bunch of creatures, and you'll wind up hearing their stories, and you'll wind up going from location to location to kind of discover what is happening in No Man's Sky, the big secret in No Man's Sky. Now, Astroneer is not without its own, and I'm using air quotes, story. There is a mystery to figure out in Astroneer. Currently, right now, there are no NPCs in Astroneer. There are no animals, and there's no NPCs that you can talk to. You've kind of landed in a barren and desolate solar system. You know other people have been there because of all the wreckage that is around you, but you don't really know what is going on. So that's your job. There are these purple things that you can see when you go from planet to planet when you're landing, that you need to figure out what that whole thing is all about. So not really a story, but more of a puzzle for you to figure out and discover as part of the main adventure of Astroneer. Okay, so I did not give all the differences between the two games. That would have been too much to give, but I just focused on the main pieces. And you can kind of see and understand that it really isn't fair to compare these two games. It's like comparing apples and oranges, because these two games, while they are space-related games, it's like saying Astroneer is the equivalent of Elite Dangerous, or No Man's Sky is the equivalent of the Kerbal Space Program. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to compare those games together, and to me, it doesn't really make much sense to compare No Man's Sky versus Astroneer. The two completely different games, but they both offer a very similar experience in the fact that you're exploring space and planets. So I've been asked over and over again, which game do I like the most? Both games are worth your dollars. You're going to invest enough time in these games, you're going to get your dollars worth and then some. So I hope you found this comparison useful. I like I said, I hate comparing both of these games, but at least I put it out there for you. For those of you guys who have been asking, there's a lot of people that's been asking. So if you haven't already, hit that like button. If you're not a subscriber, please think about subscribing. We have a great community here. And if you want to follow me on any of my social media, you can find the links in the description below. Thanks a lot. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.